Paul Malkmus is my name, and I am the President and CEO of Hallelujah Acres.
Now let's take you way back to 76. I'm sure you could probably remember it the first time Dad came in and said, kids, I've got something to tell you.
Yes, actually when Dad shared with the family that he had cancer, it was actually he'd been through cancer and already had been to some of the alternative therapy people. And so he really kept it from the family initially until he really had a plan of action. And so he did show us the tumor at that point. You can remember the bulge from under the ribs and how it was protruding out. Things that you don't often hear about though are that his dandruff. He always, when he wore a dark suit, we'd always have to brush his shoulders off. And he'd also have a lot of tissue or Kleenex when he would go speak. We'd have to make sure that he always had that on stage and make sure he took like a Sudafed or a Contact, one of those decongestants. Otherwise, he'd be up there just having a mess while he was trying to present as a pastor.
So he tells you this, he says, okay, I'm already starting on this path, don't worry, we're going to be okay. And how it's going to change for you is...
So when he came back from learning about health and nutrition, he changed his diet, but he changed all of our diets at the same time. There were 4 siblings, and so we were all in our young teenage years. And so he came back, and gone were the wonderful foods that we were used to, the ice creams and the desserts and the meats, and everything was gone. And what was for supper? It was a salad. And baked potato was there too, you know, but it was a salad and baked potato, pretty repetitive. But what he was really trying to do was change his diet, but he was so concerned about our health at the same time, he wanted to change our diet too. And so that we didn't experience the same physical problems that he experienced himself.
And that passion for his family led him to, he brought you guys to Florida at one point, didn't he?
He did. He brought us to Florida at one time. He brought us down to the Shangri-La Health Resort where he worked as the gardener. He was known as George the Gardener, and that was his reputation there. And he did lecturing on gardening, but he also did a lot of studying. It was a natural hygiene type of facility, and they used a lot of distilled water fasting, and they did a lot of nutritional teaching. And so that was really some of the foundation for where Hallelujah Acres has come today, was the teachings that he learned there at the Shangri-La.
And you were a teenager at the time?
I was a teenager. I was probably a junior in high school. And by this time I was starting to try to stray away from the diet. In fact, it was be cute. You know, Dad's always pushing and trying to move us closer to the diet. And of course, everybody else in the society was trying to push more of the traditional types of foods. And so, you know, there was one time when they found my stash of candy bars in the bedroom. And yes, there were discipline results from that, but it was fun. I can look back and say it's fun now, but I don't know that it was fun at that point. But for the 4 siblings at that point, we all said no matter what happens, we want to eat and have fun. We weren't at that time concerned about our health. And what's been interesting is that we've come back to it slowly as an adult, as we started seeing the physical problems come about that we've experienced. You know, not anything major, but you know, blood pressure a little bit up, weight a little higher, and you start saying, okay, what was Dad teaching us back then? And you start making those adjustments to come back to what he was originally sharing.
So you had come back to that. So some point between the time you became a teenager and were playing around with hiding candy bars and things like that, you went to the military. How did things change when you didn't have your dad steering you back in the right direction after you left home?
When I went in the military, I went in a completely different direction from a health and nutrition standpoint. And I really abandoned everything that Dad had taught us as a child. And I was standard American. I mean, my favorite Friday night meal was a steak. And so a steak and baked potato with a big salad and a glass of beer. That was my Friday evening fare. And so I had really moved over into the standard American side of things and really didn't give any credence probably to the health and nutritional side. I felt good, I was strong, didn't have any endurance problems, and so I didn't see any need for health and caring for the health. But you know, you wish when you get to be almost 50, you start looking back and saying, oh, I wish I'd taken a little bit better care of myself, because you'd feel better now.
So you'd come at one point, your dad had called you, we'll get to that in a minute, and said, hey, I need some help here. But in between the times where you had the steak and beer on Friday nights and there, were the times where you had some issues and you kind of went, wow, what was Dad teaching, as you said?
Yes. When I was in Scotland, I started noticing some physical breakdown, and nothing major. But we did physicals all the time, and I had a physical, and I'll never remember or never forget the person I talked with there, and she said, okay, you need to start, paying attention because your blood pressure's going up a little bit and your weight's going up. And we talked about diet, and she started talking about not all the things that Dad was talking about, but talking about diet in relation to my health. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember Dad talking about these things. And so I started making adjustments back then to say, okay, I'm feeling bad. What was Dad saying? And started working out, getting off the milk products again, and starting to reduce the amount of meat I was eating. So I was starting back on more of a transition back to what we would call the healthy diet now, back when I was in Scotland.
So from the time you were in Scotland till your dad called you for some help at Howley Acres, were you progressively trying to stay on a diet, or did you waver back and forth?
I was on a slow progression. I wouldn't call it very fast, and I wasn't really doing much wavering, but I was, back and forth. But I was like removing more sugar from the diet, removing the dairy from the diet, but I still wasn't doing the things that really need to be done to build health. So I wasn't going into the juicing, and I wasn't doing large salads and the things that we know that we need to do to really rebuild and restore the body.
So your dad calls you. Where are you? At what point are you in your career? What goes through your head when he asks you the question to come here?
I had a great career in the Air Force. I was in for 17 years, and I was down in Pensacola, Florida as an instructor. And I'd called Dad and told him that I was getting ready to retire, 3 years away, and I had a business that I wanted to start that would actually transition me out of the military. And then I had another business that I wanted to start after I get out of the military, which was really management consulting and business consulting. And I had a real passion for that. Part of my military career, though I was in intelligence, part of my career was really looking at organizations and finding out what made the organization work and how it could improve. And they call it a quality advisor in the Air Force. And so I've had a passion for that. So I called Dad, told him I was doing that, and within 3 days he was at the house, and he asked me to come be part of Howley Acres. And of course I was really thrilled at first, not. Working with your dad, working in nutrition, which is an area that I really didn't have a lot of interest in at the time, and also back in ministry type of work, being a preacher's kid, I really didn't have interest in the ministry because I'd seen some hypocrisy. I knew that ministry puts people in a fishbowl and people look at them critically, and I'd had enough of that as I was growing up, so I wasn't real interested when Dad asked me to come be a part of Howley Acres. But I did give it some thought and some prayer, and took about 3 weeks, and I called Dad back and I said, okay, I'll come look and see if I can help. I had no interest really of being part of Howley Acres. I was just coming to help him out. So I went to Rogersville, Tennessee at that point, and spent a week with him and said, I think I can help you. And I was interested with what was happening, and the operation was good. It was a real mom and pop operation, but I think at that point we had 15 or 16 employees. And so I says, well, but I can't do it here in Rogersville, Tennessee. It was way far away from, I think the nearest Walmart was an hour away at that time. So it was kind of like out there in the middle of nowhere. And so we agreed to move Howley Acres. At that point, we decided to move it to Florida, but it ended up here in North Carolina.
And I remember George saying that it was almost meant to be, because the day you moved here was the day that you got the call that you were free to leave the military.
Yes, after giving making the decision to come and be part of Howley Acres, I went back to try to get out of the Air Force. And I tried several different things, and they told me, nope, we're not going to let you out, and the doors kept closing. So I called Dad and said, I'm not going to be able to join you at Howley Acres, and I'm just going to keep down the path that I had planned on going originally. And he asked me to come to a health minister training session, and I'll never forget the training. It was an incredible time, but that first night, there was about 125 people in attendance, and every one of them came across and gave testimony of healing, magnificent healing, just by changing their lifestyle. And it really dawned on me at that point that it's more than a business. This is a real ministry, and this is ministry work, and it's making a dramatic change in people's lives. Okay, they're overcoming their cancers and diabetes, but what does that really mean for them? It means that they have their life back. It means that their families have their loved ones still around. And not just still around, but in a whole different condition than they were before. So instead of being in walkers, they're up walking and being able to play with their grandchildren again. Instead of being there having to observe in church, they're able to play the piano again. And it's just such dramatic changes in people's lives. It inspired me and it really touched my heart. And it burned within inside of me to become a part of Howley Acres and to help progress this message. So I went back to the military and I was a little more forceful with them, and they continued to say no. We did some congressional requests. We went to our congressmen and asked them to intervene, and they wouldn't. We did humanitarian, trying to say, okay, there's, Dad really needs me, and everything was denied. And there was finally a general that came through, and we spent some time talking with him. And at the end of the meeting, he said, I'm going to tell you what. He says, I'm not going to let you out because you enlisted and you're going to be in for 20 years. And he left. And after about 3 weeks, he gave me a call and he said, I'll just let you know that I've signed the paperwork and we're going to let you out. And I was like, so what changed your mind? And he said, well, it just seems like the right thing to do. And those were his words exactly. It just seems like the right thing to do. And it's obvious that the Lord really touched his heart. And through that, though, the Lord really touched my heart and created a burden within me for not just the business side of Howley Acres, but the ministry side as well, for reaching the people that are hurting, the people that are sick. And when it comes back to Dad's passion, where this all started from, it's all about helping other people. And it planted that seed deep in my heart coming to that health minister training. Thank you. I've been fighting that one for a couple minutes.
Okay. No, I find it strange that you came to help George, and the business that you wanted to start in the military was coming to people and helping them with their businesses. Did you ever correlate the two that, you know what, I really am doing what I plan to do here, but in a different way?
Yes, when I came to Howley Acres, it was obvious that what the Lord had prepared me for through my career was exactly what I'd be doing at Howley Acres. And I didn't notice it at first, but in my career I was doing a lot of contract work with software development. When I was supposed to be doing Intel work, I was building a software program instead of doing the actual Intel work. There was a time where I managed warehouses, and I had multi-million dollars of warehouses that were under my responsibility. Again, while I'm supposed to be doing contract work. There was a time where I was the quality advisor for organizations. In fact, my commander sent me to other organizations to help analyze that organization to see how they can be better. And it wasn't just from a system standpoint, but also from a personnel and a management standpoint. And I spent many, many hours in training, both in communications, to how to communicate with people, but also how to build leaders within organizations and how to teach them how to hold effective meetings. All of these types of things were special trainings that the military sent me through to teach me to help other organizations within the military. And so I saw a dramatic correlation or a real correlation between what I learned in the military and the experiences I had in the military and what I've been doing here at Howley Acres. And I think it's really helped Howley Acres grow because I'm able to lend things that I've brought to the table. And I learned it on Uncle Sam and then was able to utilize it here.
Interesting. I didn't know half of that. When you first came here, you obviously thought with all your business training and that kind of thing, you probably looked at Howley Acres, I'm assuming, and said, I can really do something with this. What was your original plan, and has it changed?
When I first came to Howley Acres, I saw opportunities abounding everywhere. Opportunities for the organization from a mission standpoint. There's so many things that we can do to help people, so many opportunities to share this message. But at that time, there were so many opportunities internally to make the organization function better. When we came on board, computers were just starting to come into place. The databases that were just in their infancy. For Howley Acres, there were no personnel structures. There was no bonus systems. There were no evaluation systems. It was truly a mom and pop type of business. And so, the first day I was here, we did a major software upgrade to start changing and moving things in that process to allow better efficiencies within Howley Acres. And I'd say that we grew so fast that it was hard to keep up with the changes. And so we're growing and trying to put the infrastructure in place as we're growing. And it was almost for the first probably 4 years, it was this continual process of trying to get on top of this thing that was exploding really. At the same time, we're trying to build the foundation to be able to carry it to a bigger and better place. So it's been, when I look back now and I look at all of the opportunities and things I was trying to accomplish back then, I can say now that it's in place and that Halley Acres is really in a position where it can grow and start reaching its full potential. You know, when you're not operating on all cylinders and things aren't smooth inside, you can only operate and function at 50 to 60 to 70% of your potential. But when you get everything, the whole machine running smoothly, then you're able to really capitalize on the opportunities and reach greater potentials and really reach more people.
And that reaching more people, marrying with the software, I find that interesting too, that you had a background in that. You were developing your own software program, you said, in the military, and now you come here and start utilizing software to reach people online. And I know that you have said that that's what's changed in Halley Acres over the last several years, is instead of being a one-way street, it's now a two-way communication, and software and technology has a lot to do with that. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Technology has blessed all of us in many ways, although sometimes technology is a curse because we've become so dependent on it. And what would we do now without our cell phones? But technology allows us to reach so many people in ways that we could never even think of reaching them before. We ship products to, I think, 170 countries a year. Every month there's over 100 countries, people from 100 countries that come to our website and read our information. And so that technology, which sometimes is painful, especially as you're trying to grow, it allows you to really share your message in ways you could never ever think of doing it before. And it allows people to communicate back with us in ways that they could never before. So now we have things like Twitter and Facebook and forums and all of those mechanisms that people can say, hey, you know, how can you help me in these areas? But it allows us to respond quicker to those needs and to their needs. So before, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it was an avenue of make the best decisions you can based on what you think or what you perceive. Now you're able to make decisions based on what people are asking for because you have real-time data from people in real-world situations.
And where does that lead us 10, 20 years from now?
I think as we look forward to 20 years, when we look back 20 years and where we've come from, and now we're looking forward 20 years, it gives us so much opportunity on the internet. And when I think of Halley Acres, I think of this organization that is synonymous with health. So when people think of health, they think of Halley Acres. And we have a lot of work to do there, but when Dr. Malkmus started Halley Acres, he had a vision that we would reach the world with the message that you don't have to be sick. And the internet really gives us that opportunity. We can't do it here in Shelby, North Carolina, all on our own. Without tools like the internet, we would just be sitting here in a local area. But with the internet, we're able to reach around the world at the same time. So in 20 years from now, I see that Halley Acres is the Mecca, not just for the message that we share now, but also for the support and for the ongoing education of people, so that it's really this place that people go to learn how to change their diet, but then also learn how to help other people change their diet. And so when there's anything that somebody wants to know about health, they know it's one place, hacres.com.
Okay. So that takes care of your vision, obviously. What is the most important thing you think for people to understand about the Hallelujah diet?
Probably the most important thing for people to understand about the Halley diet is that it's simple, but it's not always easy. And that's Ann's favorite saying. She says it to almost every group that she speaks to. And that's the truth. It's so simple. It's going back to the basics of taking care of the body. Have fresh fruits, vegetables, seeds and nuts, vegetable juices. It's such a simple lifestyle. In fact, we love to eat simply at our house. Ann and I, we just, as simply as we can eat. If it's just steaming some Brussels sprouts with our salad, that's how we like to eat. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be gourmet, but it is simple, but it's not easy. And every time, especially in this world that we're living in, every time we turn around, we're looking at advertisements for fast food or prescription drugs that are advertised, and doctors, and everybody's always pushing us into a direction that is really opposite from where we should be, which is this simple lifestyle that God gave us. And you know, He created us, He put us in this beautiful garden, and He told us what to eat. And while, yes, He did tell us that we could eat animal products after the garden and after the flood, we know that when we go back to that simple diet that He told us about in Genesis 1:29, the physical body just responds miraculously. The physical problems go away, and we just get this energy that abounds. And that's why we say that it's ultimate health.
Now, Ann has come along beside you to work in this avenue and bring all these things about. Like the saying, it's simple, but it's not easy. What's the best thing that's changed about work life and home life since Ann has come into the picture for you?
Well, I think when you have a partner that really cares about what you're doing, that's passionate about what you're doing, that you wake up with and is thinking about how we can make things better, how we can help other people, that it really just inspires you to do more yourself. And so when you have a partner, as Ann is, and okay, she's beautiful and she's intelligent and she's talented and she has great intuitions, but on a day-to-day basis when she's there supporting and helping and moving along, that it really empowers, I think, you to move even farther, or me to move farther myself, and at greater speed. I think to have, you don't have a business without risk, and you don't make decisions without risk. And you pray and you try to make the best decisions you can with the information you have, but you don't always make the right decisions. And to not be pointed at and say, well, you should have done it this way, allows you, and I think it gives you liberty to make the decisions with the knowledge that you have without feeling guilty about it. And guilt ends up being a wasted energy, but when you have somebody that's supporting you along, it just makes it easier.
What is your favorite thing to do? We asked Ann this question. When you guys are away from work, she mentioned you guys do some research and things like that. What's your perspective on free time with you two? What do you like to do?
Snuggle? How is that for a word? When Ann and I have free time, our favorite pastime probably is to be on the water. We just love to get on the water, and we have a small boat, and we go out on the local lakes, or we pull it to another lake. We'll pull it all the way to Wisconsin so we can stop at lakes on the way, just because there's something about open water that just gives you peace and tranquility, but it's also part of God's nature and the creation that we have around us. And the seasons change. And so to be on the water, having wind go through your hair, have the mosquitoes at you, it's just part of nature that God created. And I think that it brings us back, puts us in touch with each other, with creation, with God. And it's part of the simple life in a way. Okay, so we're at Highly Acres and we're expected to be dressed up and to look a certain way. But when we're out on the water, I think there's a freeing element to where we're just able to be in our swimsuits, to have a t-shirt on or not have a t-shirt on, to have sandals on or not. And I think that that's part of that whole environment of just being able to relax and be who we are, without any judgment or without anybody looking at us and saying, well, you should be doing something different.